Welcome once again to our viewers and welcome to another program, Empowering Health with Dr. Lionel Gaskin-Myers. I'm your host, John Victor. And last time we began our discussion on the digestive system and of course the mechanics of digestion. And we want to continue on that trend today, Doc. And welcome once again. Of course, it's always a pleasure to have you here. And we want to focus, because you began talking where we left off the last time, about the work of Dr. Linus Pauling, a man whose work, of course, has been well recognized. I think there were now 2 Nobel prizes for his work. And we were talking specifically, I remember the point we were dealing with the functions of the liver in that whole process, and how things can go awry in the liver at times. So let's pick it up from there as we continue our discussion on digestion.
Well, for people who wasn't with us last week, we talked about the saliva and the effect of the saliva, about chewing the food in the digestion, about the stomach and the stomach acid, and when you don't have acid, what are all the effects? Because that's what we're doing different in this program, in that when we talk about the liver and we talk about something that is important to the liver, and if that thing is wrong, if it comes in wrong in the body, where does it go? How does it affect the whole system going down?
Yes.
Not in detail, just a nice broad spectrum that allows a person to say, oh, if I don't have acid, then I don't get calcium, I don't get magnesium, I could have osteoporosis, I could have palpitations, I could have muscle pains, I could have cramps, I could affect the way how I am processing my cholesterol, all kinds of things begin to happen. So that is what we started doing for the viewers who weren't with us last week, so the last program, so that we could get an idea. I also did have a query, because I talked about the pylori, and somebody always checks. So somebody called me and asked me, and I dug out the reference, and the work is done by a Dr. Martin Blazer of the New York University Langone Medical Center. And the references are on Nature 11, 476, 393 to 394, pages 393 to page 394. EMBO rep, that nomenclature beats me there for a minute. 06, 7, close brackets, 10, pages 956 to 960. The cancer preview research 08, 1, close brackets 5, pages 308 to 311. I suppose there's 8, first month and pages, so on, so on, so. Then you could get it in the journal JID, 08, 198, 553 to 560. So it is quite referenced in 2 or 3 different medical journals. So the work is well recognized. Yes, so we started talking about the liver, and we talked about the bile and how the bile processes fats.
And I think one of the points that needs to be underscored is the fact that, you talk about acid and people might have a negative connotation of acid, but as we made the point and underscored it the last time, what needs to happen in the body is that you need to have this balance of alkalinity
and acidity.
Yes.
And there are people around who would say, you have to make the body very alkaline. That is not true. You make the body very alkaline is just as bad as making it very acid. In fact, alkaline diseases could be even more intense than acid diseases. You need to kind of keep close to neutral.
Yes.
If you have a pool in your yard and it goes acid, then you get a lot of green algae. If it goes too alkaline, then you get a whole lot of brown algae. And if you ever had a pool and you get that brown algae, notice how much harder it is to get rid of it. So you have all these things and
so the point is that there needs to be a balance, and that is what we are exploring as well.
Yes.
As we continue this whole discussion on.
The other thing we talked about is the fact that people used to fry their stuff in lard back in the early 1900s, and that nobody had plugged arteries. It was almost a non-existent thing. And so we started saying, well, if that is the case, well then what has happened? And since we're going into the liver and we're doing the bile and the bile process fats, what better time to talk about the fats and what happens so that you could get an idea of why we're having the problems that we're having now. You know, I always tell my patients who come to me, and they're talking about diabetes, and I say, well, I want you to get off the hydrogenated oil. And they say, well, you know, they kind of look at me and say, well, I use this and that. I say, you grew up in the village? You say, yeah, I grew up in Rio Claro or Moruga, wherever it is. And I say, well, in your time, when you were young, I say, and the older they are, it's the easiest thing. I say, who had diabetes? And immediately they say, nobody. I say, so if it had nobody had diabetes when you was young, how come you have 4 or 5 people in your family have diabetes now? And the doctor might tell you it's hereditary. How come it's hereditary when 50 years ago you didn't have it? You know? And what kind of oil you used to use? And inevitably they would say coconut oil. Say, well, coconut oil is not the demon that some... Who demonized it?
Yes.
Who demonized it? Why did they demonize it?
Yes.
We have to understand. You know, I was doing a program the other day and a guy said to me, oh, I read this or so and so and so. And they say that vitamins are a whole heap of nonsense. And I said, oh? So then I was stumped as to what the time. He said, what do you have to say about that? I said, you believe in Santa Claus? He says, of course. He said, well, I really don't have anything else to tell you. If you don't have the ability to use your common sense and break down what it is and what anybody is telling you and see whether it makes sense, whether it makes logical sense. If it doesn't make logical sense, throw it out the window. If somebody come and tell you, you know, coconut oil does give you high cholesterol, and it gives you this and it gives you that, and you see everybody healthy, you say, well, maybe that guy's selling me. He's selling me something that ain't right. So anyhow, we're talking about how the fellas and them started making the feed and thing, and they had this massive amount of oil.
That's right. Yeah.
And they process the oil, and then they say, well, if we're going to send this oil around the world, we can't have it going bad on us. So what we got to do is we got to make it, preserve it. But like all things where products are made for greed, right? And for profit, the human body is not taken into consideration at all. So you hydrogenate the oil. What do you mean by that? You put it under pressure, you put it under heat, and you shove hydrogen inside there, and the hydrogen molecule is forced into the molecule where the oxygen is supposed to go. And when it does that, it makes the whole thing inert, you know. As a friend of mine would tell me, he says, I had this pump I was using to pump my football, you know. He says, it come to the end of the season, I said, well, let me put some oil in it to keep it fresh. He said, and I went and I get some cooking oil, and I put it in it, and I pump it up and down a couple of times. He said, and I said, good. He said, a few months later, when I go and I try to pull it, the whole thing gum up inside, and it wouldn't move. I had to throw away the pump. He said, well, I said to myself, if it does do that to the pump, I can imagine what it do it to me. Right? So they hydrogenated the oil, and they put it out for sale. And it looked good, it tasted all right, everything's going good, until fellas started looking at side effects that were coming off from it. And Paulins did a lot of work on this. One of the things that he found is that when the hydrogenated oil gets into the system, the body cannot process it properly. So if you read his original work, he says, and what it forms is a thick, sticky, runny liquid. Right? And what happens is, it starts right in the liver there to plug up the liver. So we have a condition that we didn't have long ago, which is called fatty livers. So you could have people who are slim as a stick with fatty livers because they're eating too much trans fats and hydrogenated oil, and it's plugging up the liver. So everybody who's on that diet tend to have that fat plugging up the liver. And when you start to plug up the liver, you start to affect the energy system of the whole body. So you begin to understand that we're going down in digestion. We've only reached the liver, and already we went in the stomach, and the stomach had so much problems just by removing just the hydrochloric acid. We didn't talk about if you remove the protease that helps to break down the proteins, you know, which is another story. But we're just going through and touching certain places so that we can understand the implications of when we do things. We do not understand the implications because we normally say, all right, my acid fix. But what is the problem? If it was there for a reason. If you remove it, what happens when you remove it? If you're eating a particular oil and you're healthy and you change to another oil, what are the implications? And these are the implications. On top of that, we say that the cell needs oil. Your cell is a structure. It has all the mitochondria and all the various nucleus and all that nuclei in the cell. That's fine. But the surface of the cell is made up by the surface tension of the water. Most of us, went to high school, so we know what surface tension is. That is that it is what causes a drop of water to remain a drop and not splatter out. You know that it has a tension on the outside that holds it. It forms like a skin. Well, your cell is so small that that surface tension or that liquid actually forms a kind of surface that helps to hold the cell in place. And on that you have calcium, and you have the oil, and you have protein, and that is what forms the basis of the cell.
Together.
Now, it also goes a step further, because the way how the molecular structure of the oil is, the molecular structure of the protein, and the molecular structure of the calcium, it allows that to flow all the time, making openings and closings, and they call those gates that allows things to go into the cell. If you don't have your gates properly, so for instance, if your cell wants energy and it takes in oil or it takes in a little bit of carbohydrates, then it has to take in a little bit of insulin. If it takes in sugar, takes in some insulin, and the insulin will go and mix that. Now, that shape and that thing is very, very important. It sets a whole vibration that allows things to go and come out of it. It also defines the immunity of your cell. Right? So you begin to realize the proper oil that you drink begins to define your immunity. We could take it a step further and we say, when the acid breaks down your calcium, and the calcium gets down into your small intestines, and it has to be absorbed, on the intestine you have little villi, little fingers that protrude out. If you buy tripe, you see it,
Yes.
Right. And what has to happen is that the oil that you use, which is omega-3, getting under the skin, picks up light from the sun, the ultraviolet light, and changes it and makes a kind of glowing liquid, which is really liquid charged with photonic energy, electronic energy. So we get back to the same thing. And that electronic energy is now taken, that vitamin D as you call it, which acts more like a steroid rather than a vitamin. And it comes down into the intestine, and one of the uses is that it gets on the end of the villi and provides the right electrostatic charge to attract the calcium in to the system. So if you don't have that vitamin D, you won't absorb your calcium either. And that vitamin D comes from oil, right? From oil and sunlight. So when it gets inside, the omega-3 oil that you have inside here now bonds with the calcium in order to carry that into the cell. We making sense up to now, right? Let's hold that there for a minute and go back to our fellas making hydrogenated oil.
Yes.
And trans fatty oils. Mr. Pauling says that God didn't make that, so when it goes into the liver is totally confused. It doesn't know what to do with it, and it makes this thick, sticky stuff. And that thick, sticky stuff gets into the system. It causes a permanent set of small clots in the blood. They're always there. So right away, it impeaches the quality of the blood. Right? The other thing about it is that when it gets into the formation of the cell, it clogs up the cell. And when it clogs up the cell, it makes the cell, among other things, insulin insensitive. Now, so it makes it insulin insensitive. So what begins to happen is your sugar metabolism goes out of whack. What you call it? Type 2 diabetes. That is one of the basic aspects of the system that causes type 2 diabetes. So it follows that if you want to cure type 2 diabetes, the things that you have to do is you have to go and clean the whole body out of that bad oil. You have to try and take out the fat out of the liver and then try to regenerate it with the right kind of oil, flaxseed oil, fish oil, in order to get the body back to working where it was before.
Right. So let's talk about that cleaning process then. And what has to happen with it?
All right.
So we starting to clean, and then
so
before we
we
look
say,
to replace it.
but before we do that, it's okay. You have the oil, right? The oil gets into the liver and causes problems. You get this sticky stuff. It goes out into the system. Now, that makes a kind of cholesterol. It makes a very high density cholesterol. So when they tell you that LDL cholesterol is bad, that is really not what they mean. You know, it's a whole thing of not telling you the whole truth. What they're telling you is that when that oil now makes a cholesterol, it makes a LDL cholesterol, and they call it LDL4 and LDL5, which is really a very high density. It's very small, it's very thick, and it's very sticky. So, you say, okay, we have a little crack in the arteries. Normally you'd put a little oil and a little calcium and fix it. But now you have this sticky oil, and it gets in there and it sticks. And when it sticks, you put a little calcium in it and it fixes the problem, but it keeps on adding because it's sticky. So any other sticky stuff passes, it keeps getting attractive.
Yes.
What you have at the end is a plugged artery. So plugged arteries are totally caused by hydrogenated oil. If you doubt it, you go Lancet and them have many articles on the component of what that plaque is in the arteries, and it's always 98%, 96% hydrogenated oil. When you measure the parameters of the oil. So you begin to understand just that one thing is causing problems with diabetes. It also gets into the cell, and when it gets into the cell cannot burn oil properly. So when the cell doesn't burn oil properly, it starts to burn carbohydrates. Everybody says, so what's wrong with that? It's glucose, you know. We're good, fine. Until you get to the work of Professor Warburg back in the 1930s, who won a Nobel Prize when he says that if you have a cell and the cell starts to burn more than 25 to 30% of its energy as carbohydrates, the cell is on the edge of becoming cancerous. So you see, hydrogenated oil doesn't only set you up for diabetes, it also sets you up for cancer. Now, when you consider that those are the two scourges that we have now, you begin to say, well, if that is the case, why are we still using hydrogenated oil? Maybe we have to get like Norway, who earlier this year banned hydrogenated oil from their country. You know, have people who will stand up to the companies and say, no, we don't want that. You have places in California where they've banned restaurants from using trans fats. Right? In New York, Bloomberg tried to do it with the restaurants. So there are people who know about it, and there are people who care and who are trying to do something. But you have massive influence groups that will come and say, bah, you can't do that. But the one thing that we have is we have personal choice. This is your temple. And if this is your temple, this is where your God resides. And therefore that is where you should take care. Right?
And you have the power of choice to decide.
And you have the power of choice.
What I use and what I use.
So you have to go and say, you know what? If I can't get it, I'll go and buy 2 coconut and I'm going to make some coconut oil. Or I'll find somebody who making coconut oil and start back, going back natural.
And maybe we could dispel at this point as we're on that, because there are a few things that I want to get back to, but maybe we can dispel all of those myths that we've been living within in this modern time about, you know, coconut oil being that bad. And we know that, you know, as you pointed out earlier on, a generation or two ago, that was what was.
But remember, I think it was a couple of years ago we did one on coconut. I got this book on coconut oil and coconut.
Maybe we should bring that back.
Yeah, maybe one of these we should do a review.
Yes.
Because you know we have some bangerhead people out there who don't hear easily. Is that to take a hammer and kind of tap on their head, you know? Yeah. Somebody told me that they went to the hospital the other day and the person was telling them, don't take coconut oil because it raises your cholesterol. I says, man, I thought we'd gone past that. Or you could eat as much bread as you want if you're diabetic. You literally condemning the person to all kinds of complications. You know, it is absolutely fantastic. So what we're saying is that you go along and the liver gets impeached. It gets impeached by a lot of things. It gets impeached by the oil, which plays an extremely critical part. And I'll say something here on television because I say it in my office. I tell my East Indian patients, I say we have more diabetes among East Indians than among Negroes. Why? You all eat plenty more flour, you fry a lot more things, and you usually fry it in hydrogenated oil. All the doubles and all these things, they're causing problems. And we have to address it, and we have to change it. If we don't, it's like trying to fix one thing and make everybody do well. You're giving everybody good education and all sorts of things like that.
Yes.
For them to die at 40 or 50 of some kind of craziness before they even reach the prime of their life. You know. So you begin to understand. But then you have another thing too, is you have all these antimicrobial soaps, all these things that have heavy metal poisoning in them, and then pesticides. And then stuff like hormones. Let's digress a little bit again. So we've done the oil, right? Let's go to the chicken industry. Okay? So you decide that you're going to rear chickens for people. You're going to rear it because you're going to do it in bulk. You have the money to do it. You're going to supply people with proper chickens. They're going to be healthy. And you're going to make some money and everybody's going to be happy. That is the theory, right? But you start to grow your chickens and the chicken gets a little sick. I suppose that's what happened originally. And when it gets a little sick, you say, we need some antibiotics. So you put some antibiotics in the water and the chickens get better. But you notice that as the chickens get better, that they're heavier. So you say, no, this is strange. They get heavier. So you put a little bit more antibiotics in the water and sure enough, they get heavier. And then you begin to realize that the antibiotics don't only get rid of the immediate problem, it also causes the chickens to put on weight.
Yeah.
Why? Because most antibiotics are fungal. And any fungus in your body causes your body to accumulate fat and water. So you say, okay. So you decide, you know what? I need more money. So I'm going to put antibiotics in the thing.
As a matter of course.
Whether we need it or not.
Yeah.
And you will see the devastating problem that causes when you do that. So you do that, bam. And then you're reading about weightlifters, and the weightlifters say that, you know, they want to put on muscle, they put some steroids. So you start adding steroids, right? So you add some steroids to it. And then you say, well, I noticed that if people start taking hormones, they normally get fat, especially estrogen hormones. So you start adding estrogen hormones to the chicken. You add so much of it that if you have a young child now, a boy, between the ages of 5 and 12, that is eating chicken 4 or 5 times a week, he's getting so much hormones that by the age of 10 or 11, he begins to develop, his breasts begin to grow in a funny way. You know. So you begin to understand that we have this situation where the profit motive has completely superseded anything to do with health.
Considerations of health.
Now, what is rather interesting is that the people who are doing that doesn't seem to understand that they're eating that same chicken. And therefore, it is causing their children the same problem. Because the antibiotics in the chicken doesn't only get the chicken fat. When you eat that chicken, that antibiotics, that weak amount of antibiotics gets down into your gut and begins to kill your good gut bacteria. So when your daughter gets big and she begins to have constant yeast infections, and she begins to get fibroids and cysts and endometriosis, and she begins to grow hair on her chin, and you can't understand why the hormones have gone crazy, you have to understand it's because of the hormones that you put in the chicken, it's because of the antibiotics that you put in the chicken, it's because of the steroids that you put in the chicken that is causing that epidemic rise of problems in the society. And if you don't understand that, you'll understand nothing.
I wanted to go back, Doc. I made a note of this, the whole thing about cholesterol, and I know that maybe we can probably do an entire program on it, but you know, you mentioned the LDL and so on, and you know, people at many times would go and say, you know, let me
Have bad cholesterol,
yeah,
or good cholesterol.
cholesterol, yeah. But I think many people are misled in terms of how do you read the results of these tests?
Listen.
And what constitutes the what the test means when you get the results back. Yeah.
All right, listen. There is no such thing as bad cholesterol and good cholesterol in terms of ordinary cholesterol.
Yeah.
If you're eating stuff and it doesn't have trans fats and it doesn't have hydrogenated oil, then the LDL that you're making is going to be LDL2 and LDL3. What the body does, what the liver does, is that the LDL is like a vehicle. It's like a truck with a tree for a good thing. And it goes into the liver, and the liver says, okay, you're going to the cell. The cells up the road need some calcium, they need some of this, they need some of that, they need some nutrients, they need some vitamins, and the L take off and it takes off up the road through the blood to go to the cell. It gets to the cell lets it in, opens it, say, all right. It's like you come from the grocery, right? Takes out all the stuff, and you now have the truck empty waiting there. But it can't do anything. So the HDL comes along now, and he goes into the cell and he says, all you finished with the LDL? Okay. Picks up the LDL, carries it back to the liver takes it, recharges it, fills it back, and it goes off again. So you have no bad cholesterol. So you say, well, all right, how did we end up with bad cholesterol and good cholesterol? Before hydrogenated oil, you could have a cholesterol of 300. It didn't matter. Right. The cholesterol does not cause strokes and it does not cause heart attacks. Not that cholesterol, at least.
Yes.
The cholesterol 4 and the cholesterol 5, which is the bad cholesterol, that is the cholesterol that is going to cause you a problem. And that cholesterol is made from hydrogenated oil. So, if you're in Canada and you go to do a good cholesterol test, you wouldn't just do the LDL and do the HDL. You will do the LDL and they'll do LDL 2, 3, 4, 5. And they'll do HDL 2, 3, 4, 5. If you have a preponderance of 4 or 5, they'll call you and say, listen, back off the hydrogenated oil and back off the trans fats and start eating some natural, normal foods. Get some good, olive oil and some good virgin coconut oil and all them things and start using that. And drop that, bring that back to normal. Because this can plug up your arteries. This will cause you to get diabetes. This will cause you to do that. And things like that. But we haven't reached that level here yet. We're behind. It's just like if you're in Canada and they give you a statin drug, they tell you, you must take a CoQ10 with it. Because statins does mash up the CoQ10. The CoQ10 is very necessary for your heart operation. So you see something that really doesn't make sense. And we're talking about sense. That person have heart problems and they go to the doctor and they have an enlarged heart, which means the muscle is not functioning properly. And the doctor gives them stuff to try and help the heart. No nutrients, just drugs. And then on top of that now, they give them a statin drug to drop the cholesterol, because the theory is that if you drop the cholesterol, everything is right. But when you give them the statin drug interferes with the CoQ10. So when it interferes with the CoQ10, it means the heart muscle will not operate properly, because that is the muscle that uses the most CoQ10 in the body, which seems always to be
so obvious, eh?
Yeah, it is. If our doctor say, well, this don't make sense, but you know what? Let me recommend a little extra CoQ10. Let me recommend a little 100 milligrams, a little 200 milligrams, in order that I don't have that problem. But you don't see that. So it's this whole thing. One thing causes something else, which causes something else, and nobody ever tells us about what is the ladder of progression going along. That's what we're doing in the show here today. We're talking about the ladders of progression and why it is that a lot of the times the medical format that is given to a patient is not designed to heal the patient. It's designed to collapse the patient in the long run and make more sickness. So getting on with it. So we have the liver. And you say, well, you have to clean the liver. One of the easiest ways of cleaning the liver, we talked about it last time, is by using things like beets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Garlic and things like that. They tend to help. Beets especially the leaves. The leaves will thin the bile, because one of the things that we have a lot now is bile stones, gallstones as you call it, which is really the cholesterol that is in the bile right? Forming little balls and sticking together, you know, because if ever you have gallstones and you expel them, and they can be expelled, and you take a torchlight and you shine it in the bathroom, in the lavatory when you finish, you see these little green balls floating on the water. That's really the gallstones that, you know, mashed up outside there, just straight fat. So once you understand that, you begin to understand that you're really racing against not so much whether you die earlier or whether you don't die earlier. That's something that we don't quite understand. What we're racing against is a quality of life. Right? I remember I was much younger. I just bought a boat from one of my, I was calling him a pumpkin vine uncle. And we had it down, Caranage. And he had a, I think it was a 150 horsepower engine on it, you know. So he parked it down the beach. So I had two friends with me and they consider themselves to be strong. And he says, go down the road and bring up the engine for me. And they set up their face and they go on down. And two of them fighting to get it up off the beach. And he looks at it and he says, he was 85 at the time. And he says, what the hell them two fellas doing down there? So he walks down the beach and he picks up the 150 horsepower engine by himself, puts it on his shoulder and walks up the beach with it. So here we're not talking so much about how long you're going to live. We're talking about the quality of life.
Yes.
How many 85-year-old people you see now that are strong?
Not very many.
Where I live down, where I used to
It's expected that your strength and so on will degenerate.
will deteriorate.
Yes.
Right time you get to 60,
Yeah, you're not supposed
my
to
joints falling apart. This doing
You're not
that.
supposed to have strength at that point.
No.
Yeah, yes.
What's that?
It's just a natural.
Strength what? Strength. What you're supposed to have is a walker.
Yeah, oh yes.
And trembling.
That is considered normal.
Right? It is also so that. For instance, as we're talking about oils and things like that, there's this lady, I'm trying to remember her name. Lord, sometimes I do so much stuff. Anyhow, the basis of it is that she's a doctor and her husband got Alzheimer's. But she's a research doctor. So she said, I wonder if Alzheimer's is really a starvation of energy in the brain. A kind of diabetes in the brain with all the stuff that is going on. So she stops and she thinks, well, if that is the case, then I'd have to find something that would cross the blood-brain barrier. And when it crosses the blood-brain barrier, will carry energy into the brain that will allow the brain to process it. And therefore, if the brain gets energy and things like that, it should recover. So she looks around for everything, and she looks, and she says, what I need is a medium chain fatty acid. Right? I don't need an omega-3, that won't work. I need a medium chain fatty acid, something that have energy in it, carry the energy, and something that crosses the blood-brain barrier. So she went through all of this, and she suddenly ended up with our good, much despised thing, coconut oil. So she says, okay, if I'm surmising this right, if I give my husband a tablespoon of coconut oil twice a day, I should see an improvement. But she's a scientist. So what she does is, she gets her husband to draw a clock. She says, come and draw me a clock. But he's an Alzheimer's patient. So he draws two or three little balls, and he tries to put the hands, but one hand there and the other hand here. Yeah. And she says, oh, that's good. And she starts feeding him the coconut oil. But she wants to judge whether he's getting better or not.
There's improvement in his condition.
So a month later, she says to him, draw a clock face for me. This time he draws it in a circle, and he puts two or three there, one outside, and he has one of the hands in the right place and one hand not there. She says, okay. Month later, she gives him another drawing. This time he draws the clock almost properly, the hands in the right place, most of the things in. At about 4 or 5 months, he draws a perfect clock face. Not only does he draw a perfect clock face, he's also helping her wash, helping her clean the house. He can carry on conversations. So she writes it up. Now you have it. Of course, it's out there, and it is taking a long time to filter into our little society, right? So what you have to say is, hey, if you have Alzheimer's, if you have a person in the house who have Alzheimer's, please get some virgin coconut oil and give them a tablespoonful morning and evening for the next 6 months. You know, I have people, they come by me and they have a pain, you know.
Give me a pill.
Give them a pill. So you give them a pill. And they ring you up next morning and they say, I took the pill. And they have some pain for 10 years. And the pain ain't gone. So I didn't give you painkillers. And, you know, I say, if you had gone and broken your foot, what would have happened? They say, well, they'll put it in a cast. I say, how long they'll put it in a cast? I say, I don't know. I say, well, for about 2 months. I say, when they take it off, the doctor will tell you, take it easy for the next 2 or 3 months.
That's right.
So technically speaking, you're curing for about 5 or 6 months.
That's right.
I say, you have arthritis, so you have this.
And you may still have
and
residue pain for over a year.
and you take one pill, and you expect the arthritis to disappear.
Yeah.
That is the stupidity that which we have disconnected ourselves from our bodies. We don't know how the body behaves anymore.
But just like the fast foods, you know, we've become that kind of instant society where you go to a doctor and so on and you expect the kind of quick fix. You know, for a problem as we're discovering that, you know, has been developing over a long period of time.
Yeah, listen to this. As you're talking about fast food, something just occurred there. I'm in the office the other day, and guy comes to see me. You have acne, and, you know, 23 years old, 22, you know. Worried because the girls and things. And I said, okay, we could probably do something about the acne, right? Fix it up nice and thick. So he says, you sure? I say, yeah, don't worry about it. Chinese medicine, good at that. So organize, get him organized, and he gets up and he says, now, older men, when they come to see me and they get up and they're about to go, because we have a fixation about these things. So yeah, doc, you have anything, boy, you know. And you say, sure, you know, give something to help him up.
Yes.
So this little 22-year-old guy gets up in the office, and he's about to go, and he said, doc, you have anything? So I look at him quite, I say,
yes.
For what?
You shouldn't be asking for remedies.
For what? No, it didn't go on a punch. Yeah, he asked him something with the boy. He said, well, you know. So I said, well, he's sounding like them old guys,
yes,
like me in the 70s and 80s, right? I say, but he's 20 years old. I say, you're asking me for what I think you're asking me for? He said, yeah, it has come up, and then after 2 or 3 minutes, it'll just fall back down. So he said, what happened? Why are you standing up there shaking your head? I said, well, at your age, I had a string I used to tie it down with. What gone wrong with you?
Yeah.
You'd gone the other way. Yeah. But it brought to me very forcefully that here I was at this 22-year-old kid, and he was already suffering energy problems, basic energy problems, because he was eating all the wrong foods. It was poisoning the liver. It was the liver was expelling it out on the skin, because that's what happens. So they tried to get rid of it, and not only that, it was affecting his whole energy. His whole kidney, adrenal, testosterone system was out of whack. And that is what we're talking about, is that a little thing, like what you eat, and you just say, oh, that ain't going to do me nothing, man, if I eat it a little bit of thing. And I do a little bit here and a little bit there, and you start to deteriorate.
Yes.
You start to deteriorate. So whereas we had diabetes before, and the diabetes used to affect you when you get to 40 or 50, now you're having a lot of children showing diabetes. You know, you have a lot of kids coming in, boys with breasts. And not only do they have breasts, but whenever you have extra hormones, not only do they get big breasts, the pee-pees get very small. So you have a double problem, right? And you could compound that with, say, the soy milk, which is one of my pet peeves. I don't know how they sell that poison to people, you know, and say, hey, this thing is causing havoc in your society. And we know extra estrogen in a woman to set her up for cancer. And we're not doing that, but we've spent a tremendous amount of money on buying drugs for people and not understand, instead of buying the drugs, let's fix the problem from the bottom. Let's fix it from the bottom, right? You say, oh, we're having this study on health, and nobody talks about the ills that are going on in the society, right?
It's like the hydrogenated oils. You know, you have to deal with it, you know, at the source. And then the whole question is, you know, in correcting that is, of course, you know, changing that whole...
changing the metabolism of your whole society. Your whole society. So anyhow, we come back now. We drive the bus around the route, and we come back, and we come back into the gut. We're going down into the intestines. So you get into the small intestines, and the foods gets neutralized. It gets neutralized with the bile, which is now processing the fats, and it gets neutralized also with the pancreatic juices. Now your pancreatic juices normally have a pH of about 12. They're very, very alkaline. And they come down, and you have pancreatin, and you have stuff for breaking down protein, stuff for all kinds of stuff. But you also have, some of the pancreatic juices have the unique ability to help break up lumps and things like that in the body, you know. So you begin to realize that the pancreas is a very elaborate, small instrument in the body, but keeps the body healthy. Because if the pancreas doesn't give you insulin, you're in pain.
Yeah.
You're in real pain. And and so you could, let's look at another loop with the insulin. Long ago, let's say you're living out in Moruga, right? And you tell your wife, you say, I'm going up the top of the hill there and see if that bunch of fig right. So you're going up the hill, and you're looking at the bunch of fig. And when you look, as you turn around to move, you hear, you turn around, it's a wild pig. It was the real time, before the hunters and everything. Right? And he decide he coming down the track, and you decide you going up the track. But when you're going up the track, you have to decide, well, boy, he look kind of dangerous, you know. So it's either I decide to run, or I decide to carry home lunch, right? So anyhow, you're going to have to burn energy. And the body goes into a state of fear, and so the adrenals, two little glands above the kidneys, kicky, boom, send adrenaline, boom. We all know about adrenaline, because every time we get it, we go on a high, right? Because it goes straight into the liver, and as it goes into the liver, bam, the liver releases sugar. As it releases sugar, it whips into the pancreas and say, insulin. So you have sugar and insulin in the system, right? So sugar and insulin is in the system, going along nicely, and the body says, we're getting ready for some activity. So it says, go down to the kidneys, hold on to your sodium, right? Why? Because we're going to sweat. As soon as we're going to sweat, we need the salt, right? Get the whole pores working properly and everything. So it holds on to the sodium. The pig come down the track, you go up the track, fight break out, pig going home dead, right? What happens is you've used up all the sugar, you've used up all the insulin, you've sweated like hell. On top of that, you have to take 50 or 60 pounds of meat and put it on your back and walk half mile back up the road. So by the time you finish, everything used out and you're back to normal. Okay? Now we've become modern. We don't have to go and kill no pig on the track to get meat. We drive around to Hilo and we buy all the processed foods, all the white flour and the dead meat that they're selling, you know, and you carry it home. And the wife says, I am going to treat you nice. So she give you a macaroni pie with a big helping of rice and all kind of thing, cook up and thing, and then meat, and then she said, well, I make a little salad for you. One slice of tomato and a piece of lettuce.
A slice of beef.
Yeah, a slice of beef? You think you're in the Hilton or what?
I'm just being optimistic.
And excuse me, I have a little fighting over a cold there. So you sit down and you eat, and you know that you've eaten, because when you finish, you're like one of them mackerel, you know. Oh God. And you know you like a party baby. Yes. And I just sitting down there.
That was good.
And I just sitting down telling the wife, well, that good, you know, that good. I wonder what it have on television. So your battle is going to be watching Mr. Schwarzenegger kill about 1 million people with one gun, and then when he finishes, he say, I'll be back. and that is your thing, because that's what you're going to get involved in. And if anybody asks you, well, why you don't go and walk? I have no time. When I come home in the evening, I don't have any time. You don't ever stop to think, oh, yeah, you're too tired. You're too tired, you're too tired, you're too bluffs. You're too full. So your body sits down there and processes all these carbohydrates, and the sugar goes boom up in the air. Yes. The insulin go boom up in there. Now it ain't gonna do nothing with it, so you're gonna take it and make fat with it and put it round here. You know, the spare tire that we all have, right? And everything going good. And you're going to get up next morning and your sugar is still going to be high. It ain't going down yet. And you're going to sit down and you're going to eat 3 or 4 slices of bread, which will run it back up again. So your body is constantly running with a sugar above normal, or big bouts when it's above normal. And it keeps telling the kidneys, hold on to the sodium, hold on to the sodium. So the sodium starts building in the blood. As the sodium starts building in the blood, sodium has caused the blood to collapse. Fibrinate goes in. We could get into the atomic valence and all kinds of things as to why that happens, but just suffice it to say it causes it to come together and form clots, which is strokes. So the body in its wisdom says we can't allow that to happen, so it says water. So it pulls water into the arteries. When it pulls water into the arteries swell up, right? So everything now running nice and full. And you're busy eating more macaroni pie, so you're trying to swell up more. So you go by doctor, the doctor says, your blood pressure is high. Your blood pressure always high. Your blood pressure always high because you're eating crap. So you say, all right, what do I do? He says, cut out the sodium. Right? He doesn't tell you, hey, you need to stop eating all the carbohydrates and you need to do some exercise in order to bring down the sugar, which would then obviate the need for eating low sodium, because the body will get rid of the sodium in its own accord. Right? So, let me agree. If I have somebody and they come to me and they have diabetes and I say, diet, no flour, no sugar, very little rice, if you could do without anything, almost no provision, plenty vegetables, plenty peas and beans, fish, right? All that kind of stuff. Low glycemic foods. Once in a while you'll find somebody who will do it because they want to get better. You notice my term, once in a while. That person will come after 2 weeks and they say, Doc, I think something wrong with my prostate, you know, or the woman will say something wrong with my whole bladder, you know. So why? Say, like peeing plenty. What they're telling you is that the sugar has gone down and it has stayed down long enough that the body says, hey, we don't need the sodium anymore. So it sends a message to the kidneys, and the kidney starts to release the sodium. But it has to release all the water with the sodium too. So what you don't realize is that you have about a whole gallon of water inside your arteries coming out for the next day and a half, 2 days. The thing about it is that the blood pressure was 185 over 105. And you're taking 4 blood pressure medicines or 3 blood pressure medicines. Most of them is to slow your heart down and all kinds of things, and your blood pressure is still high, because it have nothing to do with your heart. It has to do with your eating habits. So you take the eating habits, sodium goes out. When the sodium goes out, that same person could then say, Doc, you know what was my blood pressure this morning? It was 130 over 75. I say, so? I never see my blood pressure at that. In all my years, I never see my blood pressure as that. It's going to come back up. I say, only if you start eating junk again. It comes right down. Not only does it come down, it comes down and it stays down. So what always puzzles me is, why does a doctor put you on blood pressure medicine and tell you that you're on it for the rest of your life, when he could tell you, watch your diet? If you tell me, if it was me and he said, well, it have a way you could do this, you know. You could watch your diet, right? When you watch your diet, do some exercise, start with a little walking, and give it about a month, and your blood pressure will come down, which it normally does. Everybody who exercises knows that. That the minute you start to exercise and you say, you know what, I want to lose some weight, I want to look nice, you know, and you do that, sure enough, your blood pressure comes down 30, 40 points. So you begin to understand the whole set of problems that we have It's the gut. It's what we're doing with the gut, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. So anyhow, we're going down now. We're going down in the small intestine, and stuff gas starts to get absorbed. In Chinese medicine is very poetic. They describe all the functions poetic. So they say, in the small intestine, you're separating the pure from the turbid. What it means is all the stuff that the body has digested properly in the stomach is now ready to be absorbed, and so the small intestine absorbs it. It doesn't need to be further processed, so it absorbs it. Various parts of the small intestine absorbs various things. So you begin to understand that life has a whole rhythm and a whole vibration to it. So that even in the small intestine, the front part of the small intestine do absorb vitamin B's, the bottom part of the small intestine do that. And you have this whole arrangement. So you have a certain part in the small intestine where you'll have more vitamin D3, so you have more calcium and things being absorbed. It's fascinating. Anything that you take in the body, and you go smaller and smaller and smaller. As you go smaller and smaller and smaller, you say, how the hell does the body do all that, boy? All these millions and millions of little things, and keep it right and do it exactly right, day in, day out. You know, when you have a car, you always have to be putting gas and doing this and doing that. And if you don't change your oil every few months, the thing will mash up in no time. Here you have a body for 70 years, 80 years doing this thing. And it has to do it right. And you begin to understand that really the universe is a marvelous thing, right? Or if I say God is a marvelous being. So you come down into the small intestine, and you do that. You take it up, and then you're left with stuff now that, technically speaking, ain't much use to you. Right? You have little bacteria inside there, but when you get into the large intestine, especially when you get down into the colon, you have bacteria growing inside there. You have plenty bacteria going inside there. In fact, the amount of bacteria, if you count each bacteria, the bacteria and the viruses in your large intestine is more than all the cells put together in your body. So you have anything from about 2 to 4 pounds of bacteria in your gut. So let us digress a little bit. Let's go somewhere else for a minute. In the late 1800s, they realized that in the Caucasian mountains up in Bulgaria, up in the north there, they had a bunch of guys, but tribes, who's lived to some really crazy ages, 160 years old. And I ain't talking about when you reach 80 falling down. I'm talking about guys who
strong 160.
at 130, they still riding their horse and they still fathering children. So just imagine at 130, it's still working. Woo!
A man of 22 want to get a little help.
There's something wrong, right? So they had this guy called Ira Mechnikov, who was a scientist, and he decided that what he would do is he'd go there and he would see what it is these people are doing. What are they doing different? What are they eating? What are they doing? Why is it some genetic thing?
Yes.
So he goes and he spends some time and he comes back and he says, the only thing I noticed that they're doing different from us is that they're eating a lot of fermented foods. So he begins to check, and he begins to find out that all the societies that are eating fermented foods tend to live healthier and longer than people who are not eating a lot of fermented foods. So here is where I'm going to fall back now on our own society. When you was younger, if you was of Indian tradition and you're living in the village, at the back of the house you'd normally have a pen. And in the pen you would have a couple of cows. And they'd send you out to milk the cow. And when you finish milk the cow, nobody is selling anything at that point. They're going to take it, they're going to heat it up a little bit, and they'll get a glass of milk to drink before you go home. Now, your cow wasn't living on grain, your cow living on the big pangula grass in the back. So that's a healthy cow. Chewing its cudden thing, which is to regurgitate, make real food. And when you finish, the mother will take it and she'll put a big chunk of it to sour. And she'll take the rest and she'll let the cream come up, and she'll take the cream off and she will beat that up And when she beat that up, what she'll get? Butter. People don't know how to make butter nowadays. Or cheese.
Yes.
Cheese is the thing that you go in the supermarket and it's wrapped in either foil or, or plastic. Yeah. It comes from somewhere up north. And then you have the ones that are processed, which is packed in even better paper. Because it ain't right, it's half of it synthetic in any case. But anyhow, they'd make their own butter. They'd make their own cheese. But most of all, they'd sour the milk and they'd make dahi. Sour milk. And they would eat that every single day. Okay? So, you had a situation where you had a bunch of people who were eating fermented foods all the time. Consequently, you used to have a lot of people living to 90 years and 100 years, which they're not doing. These are the same people, same genetics, but something has gone wrong. If you were taking your butter and you're making your fresh butter, and your butter was from cows that are fed grass, inside that butter is a thing that, oh boy, I hate when I have a name to remember and I can't. Just now I remember. Raymond Lee. Raymond Lee, back in the early 1900s, found that if you took butter from grass-fed cows, that inside that butter, in the oil, they had a thing called the Woolsen factor, which was an anti-stiffness factor. So when you ate that butter, it stopped your joints from getting stiff. Now you have butter down the road that if they take from cows that they feed grain with, they don't have it. Nothing. So it doesn't have it. So when you eat the butter now, the only thing you're getting is fat. And not good fat at that most of the time. Right? So you begin to understand that God made cows to eat grass, so it would have a certain thing in the milk, so that when the baby cow drink it, the baby cow will do something in a particular way. Right? So that you have that with the sour milk. Eh? In the German society, you have sauerkraut, which is cabbage and things that they take and they ferment and they package away. They make preserves and they put it in the food. When they eat it, they put it in their little salad and thing, cut it up, give it a nice acidy kind of taste. Right? So all these people lived to all kinds of ungodly ages, and that didn't just live, they lived healthily.
Yeah. Quality of life, as we were alluding to earlier.
Right. So we come along in our society, and they had a guy called Mr. Fleming. And Mr. Fleming discovered that certain fungus that grow in on the walls, if you take it and you put it next to certain bacteria that was inimical to you, it would kill the bacteria. The name of the fungus was penicillin. So he took the penicillin and he said, whoa, new discovery. We now have something that will kill any disease inside man. So everybody went and they got their things. And the early doctors noticed that when you use penicillin or any of the other ones, because once you find one, you then started finding a lot of others, that it would kill the bad bacteria that was causing you the problems, but it would also kill the good bacteria in your gut. The same bacteria that allowed you to live old, the same bacteria that would make all your vitamin Bs and all kinds of things for you, that was now dying. And like all things, nature abhors a vacuum. So what happened is that opportunistic fungi started to grow. And out of that, a whole host of diseases descended upon mankind. Now, I think they're telling us that we're beginning to run out of time. So we'll have to continue this conversation the next time, where we will talk about what happens when your gut bacteria goes bad and all the various diseases that develop from out of that. That's fair?
Yes.
All right. So we'll take it from there.
Right. So, of course, we will pick up that the next day in our next program and continue our trend or discussion. I suspect that you have still a lot more on the work of Dr. Linus Paulings in this regard to develop as we go along.
It's him and Mechnikov and This is the guy who did the work on cancer. Warburg and Raymond Lee, who developed a whole host of treatments for all these various diseases. And we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and of course, for your viewers, I suspect that you may have some questions and so on following our discussion today, and you can email them to docmyers@yahoo.com, and we'll be happy to address them on the program.
Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us for another program of Empowering Health.